Hello everyone, welcome to this interview on the CW social media channels. My name is Chris Webb, Head of Communications. As you can see in front of you on the screen, we're joined by our General Secretary, Dave Ward. How are you doing, Dave?
Yeah, good. Looking forward to the TUC Congress this week and looking forward to talking to our members.
Yeah, so we've got Dave, as Dave just outlined there, here at TUC Congress, but we weren't going to go into that without speaking to you as our members about a raft of issues that are going out there as a union. We're going to get into all the key things that we've seen you raising on our pages, we've seen in the emails, we've had the feedback from our reps, so we've got loads of detail to go through in this interview. It's going to be a long interview, but as the week goes on, we'll segment it out and break the subjects up so you can watch it or listen to it as you see fit in the coming days. Dave, I want to get into the issues because there are plenty of them, but before that, I want to talk a little bit about the union. I want you to ask the first question on the union and, criticism. I think a lot of it justified about a period of silence or the union gone quiet and not so much comms, people saying when it was a strike, when it was you needed us to vote for ballot industrial action, you were all over us. Now we've got the deal, Royal Mail are still kicking lumps out of us and you've abandoned us, you're not talking to us, you're not communicating with us. What would you say to those members who are saying, like, where are the union essentially, and I suppose at this point questioning if the union still has the same influence as always had?
Yeah, look, I understand where our members are with that because it's a sort of difficult time for them now. If people were thinking that you reach an agreement and all of a sudden everything goes away, it doesn't. We should talk about the reasons for that. But in terms of where the union's been, it's been relentless for us as well in terms of meetings with the company, trying to get them to hold to the agreement is like a daily meeting. Because there's so many difficult issues. Obviously the quality of service stuff, we've all been focusing on that. We have been meeting our branches, our reps, we've had a national briefing and all of the union's representatives are involved in meetings at different levels, primarily about trying to move forward out of the crisis that Royal Mail have created. And that isn't easy. I think there was always going to be a natural moment where once you've reached an agreement, you don't have the same level of communications, but genuinely, it's never been busier for us. It's never stopped in terms of the amount of meetings. Let's get to the crunch issue. Why is it still so difficult? There's two reasons. One of them is Royal Mail's financial position, and we should talk about that. And the second one is that the management that are in the company, I've got to be honest about this, been around a long time, you can fall out with managers. I think there's a deeper problem with the management that are in the company. I genuinely don't think they understand how to move Royal Mail forward. I don't think some of them have got the experience of Royal Mail, and I don't think they've got the ideas, even if we were getting on properly, to move us out of some of the positions that they've created from the onset of the dispute. The quality of service situation is a major worry, and it'll be a worry for our members. It's demoralising our members if you come into work every day and you see the work that was left there from the day before. I've had mates of mine who have phoned me up and said, I've been away for a week's leave and I come back and my delivery hasn't been out, other than the parcels and the specials. And I think they're hiding the amount of quality of service failures, but they'll get found out about that. And the biggest worry in terms of, obviously for our members, it's really, really difficult because the pressure is on them. But the biggest worry is this simple fact that if we don't put quality of service right, this company's finished. You can't grow a business if you can't deliver the customer services that you already promise. And I think the company understand that. So let's turn to what they're saying about their financial position, some of which is difficult for us to talk about because the levels of our discussions on that do require us to be a bit sensible about what we say. But I don't think we can hide the fact that they created this financial crisis when they gave all of that money away, and they've never recovered ever since. And what they're saying to us is that they got a major cash flow problem. And they're out there at the moment, as I understand it, trying to raise cash. They've got ideas on how they are going to do that, and I think they will do that and will be successful in doing that. But we can't underestimate how much of the problems that are there at the moment are simply down to the fact that they're not going to spend any money to put right the quality of service problems that they've created. Now that potentially moves the company into a tailspin, into a cycle of decline that could end up with it being finished. And that ain't down to our members, that ain't down to the dispute, that ain't down to this union. That's down to the decisions that they're making. If they get that money, and if the cash situation improves temporarily, then our question is what you're going to use it for. And if it's used for the right things, now obviously we are told that the payments for our members are safe, that's banked away, but the problem, so our members can look forward to the lump sum payments and they deserve that and more. But the problem with cash is a problem for all of us. And the financial position of Royal Mail, we've got to move on now in our union of moving beyond blaming. We've got to remind people where it came from. Our members don't need telling that, they know it. But we've also got to find the solutions for the company to move us forward because that's the way we're going to protect jobs. So we can't ignore it. It is possible to say on one hand, there's a cash crisis now, and a year ago, just over a year ago, there was the record profits. The truth is, you can reconcile those two positions. And if you go through the dispute, if you go through all the issues and the fact that Royal Mail gave virtually all of the profit away, you can understand how we've got into the position we're in. So look, I want us to solve that problem. I want the union, I want our members, because it's in our members' interest that we solve it. Let me talk a little bit about the issue of the managers and capability again. That's a real problem because we're sitting opposite a team who seem to be doing the same things that they've been doing for a year that have produced disastrous results. And, I'm going to be honest with our members, we don't hear nothing that inspires us with confidence that they got ideas to get us out of this thing. That's where I think the union has got to now focus on what are the solutions to some of these problems. We've got to get beyond moaning about Royal Mail, and we've got to genuinely find and put our ideas forward, and the union has been working on some of that, and I hope today that we can start to talk about some of that as well.
I mean, one of the things, Dave, that I remember during the dispute quite vividly, because I was with you, is you doing a big long show on LBC. I think it was extended by an hour due to the popularity of our members phoning in. And you were making the point then, and it was supported by, I think it was Ian Dale who was presenting it, and like hundreds of calls from our members, that there's a certain type of business leader in this country. People, I think your phrase was, people used to be paid to build businesses, now they're paid to break them up. And what you've just said there, I think makes a lot of sense and will make a lot of sense of our members. But it surely doesn't make sense for Royal Mail. They're not going to make more money by reducing quality of service. They're not going to get more customers by delivering letters one day a week when people got no idea whether things are going to come through. So that's one part of the question. Do you agree with that? Second part of the question is, you touched then on the managers, and this is, by the way, this is a session where we're going through the issues. It's not a Royal Mail senior management bashing session, but obviously this is pertinent to the question I'm going to ask, is if they get that additional investment, which we hope the company obviously does for the security of our members and the security of the company, what confidence can we have that putting that money in the hands of the same people who have made so many mistakes?
I actually think that's a problem for the company. I think the company must be sitting there, board levels, new CEO just come in, we should talk about that at some point.
Yeah.
I think they'll make changes. I think they'll make further changes than obviously Simon Thompson leaving. I think that needs to happen. And they need fresh people with fresh ideas. They need to look at themselves and genuinely look at that agreement and say they've signed up to working together at all levels. It's plastered all over the agreement. Are they doing that at this stage? No. Can they do that? I think there's a question of their capability as to whether they could ever do that. So you need people in this business now who've got ideas. You don't need command and control management and all that stuff that is killing the job and killing the company. You need good managers at all levels, and we should never have a problem with good managers. We might disagree on some things, but we should support managers who have got ideas that the employees understand and that the employees can relate to, and crucially, that our members can input into how we get out of these problems. And that's what we've been putting forward. We've been saying we'll support the agreement. We still think, as difficult as it was, for the circumstances where we were, it was the right agreement. Deploying that agreement and building on some of the things that are in there is the only way forward. And that means the approach to that has to buy in the workforce. The approach to that has to put quality of service right straight away. And that's where we've been in the last couple of months, really arguing with them about how do we do that, coming up against this brick wall of there's no cash to invest. Well, the company's in the tailspin. And therefore, the answer to the question, if you don't put quality service right, there isn't a Royal Mail, there isn't a company. Now, they know that. I think genuinely, I would say from the conversations we've had, it may not come out like that. They know it, but they've got to get that cash injection. I still think there's going to be a problem about where they spend that money, because I would imagine if I was on a board, I'd be wondering whether I would spend that money with people who haven't moved things forward. But the fundamental question that faces Royal Mail as a company and its leadership is, do they want to work with employees? Do they want to treat them better? Do they want to get them on board for the agreement? Because that is the only way forward. Now, I hope that the new CEO is going to be in that place and is prepared to do things differently to what the previous management are doing. The fear of all people in the union, I think, is that the current management ain't capable of doing things differently.
Thanks, Dave. I want to talk, one of the criticisms, I suppose, I could sort of frame this for the members. So one of the criticisms we have from the members is that never before has there been an agreement with so many loose ends. We signed the agreement, the payment date for the back pay, etc. is in there, and then they move it. We come to do something on seasonal variations, and they start deducting people's annual leave off them when they weren't meant to be doing that. It's clear in the agreement. So I want to talk about some of these issues really, but before, your view on is this just what happens? Because obviously not every single national agreement, certainly since I've been in the union, has always contained commitments to future talks, future discussions and stuff. So I think there is an element there of we'll always be engaging the company every single day. That's why we're a trade union. So I think there's a bit of realism there, but it does seem that on a number of areas in this agreement, like never before, always, I think you've mentioned this, traditionally we've had a real period of calm after we've had a dispute like this, but we haven't had that. We haven't had any drop off. We haven't had any drop off in the workplace intimidation. We haven't had any drop off in essentially trying to rewrite the agreement after it's been signed. So your view on sort of members who are saying yeah, I was happy to sign up for that, but I didn't sign up for this or the other, or you didn't tell me about this.
Look, I will say this, that the circumstances that we're in have never been as difficult. And I'll say that, honestly, with or without the current management team, transformation from where Royal Mail is to where it needs to be is always going to be a difficult journey. And I think most of our members must have realised that. And on a personal level, for years now, I've been saying that we have got to move forward, because letter decline is accelerating. There's no getting away from that. And the things that sustain work for our members, which the union ultimately has to focus on, means that we do need to get into the parcel arena in a big way. And the union can never turn down work. And if that means changing shift patterns, if that means working later to deliver that work because that's where the market is, we would be absolutely mad not to take the position that says that we want that work. And the real battleground that's been consistent through the last 3 or 4 disputes has been that Royal Mail always wanted to move into parcels and ditch Royal Mail completely. The shareholders probably say to the board, you might as well ditch Royal Mail. The money to be made is in parcels. And as part of that, the company have fought all the time to get a separate parcel company, and there's different ways they establish that, and then load it, put move the work from here over to there, and then load it with self-employed workers and the cheapest labour models they can find. You know, we don't get the credit for this, that we fought that off on so many occasions. But the other side of that coin is that then our members have got to do that work. Now, I understand completely if a postal worker who's worked in a certain way for years and years decides that, you know, that's not for them, that is fine. And I think a lot of our members have chosen that route. What we can't accept is our Royal Mail have deliberately gone out to demoralise our members, to get inside their heads in a way that says to them, we don't really want you. And the truth of that, that's what we've been fighting here. They don't want our members in many ways. They want people who will do what they say day in, day out, but they want people who are cheaper than what they have to pay currently. And that, unfortunately, is the way that business operates. The sad part of that, which is why, you know, at the Trade Union Congress this week, to bring that in slightly, we have got to tackle the disease that's in business across the world, really, and certainly across the UK, of business leaders who cannot grow a business. All they do is smash it up and create profits and give those profits to shareholders. That's a wider dispute, and I hope that we're going to get business leaders in who suddenly, they used to be able to do it years and years ago, but now there's an epidemic of business leaders who have lost the ability and the ideas to grow a business. And the key thing with Royal Mail is you have got to get the workforce on board. Now, again, we haven't spoken about this enough, but there are sections of that agreement that give us a pathway to the future, that our members can shape the future of this industry. And we're pushing that as well with Royal Mail, and that's about the expanding role of postal workers. And we do want to get into more detail because our members have got the ideas to make Royal Mail more successful. And the company's leadership have got to be prepared to open themselves up to those ideas.
I want to pick up on the point, I think it's spot on contribution, Dave, I want to resonate with our members. I want to pick up on the point you made about declining letters, though, because, you know, I think that's statistically undeniable. Although, like, you know, many of our members, because of absorption, lapsing, etc., will say, like, you know, I don't see that, they're not on my round. No. As the printer goes off in the background, if you're wondering what that noise is, everyone. But the letters, as far as, like, you know, I can see, is like almost the perfect example of how reckless Royal Mail management have been. So, you know, yes, letters are going down, and yes, there's a trajectory for them to continue getting down. But it seems to me the toxic mix of dismantling the USO, dismantling quality of service, and then going just last week, oh, it's also going to cost you an extra 14 pence for a first class stamp, means not Royal Mail aren't, like, you know, seeing this as a project where they can see where the letters are declining and they're trying to manage it over a period of time. They're trying to destroy letters. They want, like, out of it. So, I mean, it'd be like us saying, well, we're a trade union, we've got 100,000 members, we might have 75,000 in 5 years. We need to talk about over the next 5 years to make sure the union's fit for purpose. It's like you turning around and saying, get rid of those 25,000 members now. It doesn't make any sense.
So what we've got to do as a trade union is put our ideas forward to counter that. And, you know, that's where the union needs to be now. We can moan about, you know, I mean, I've done some of it in here, but I do it in a way that I'm just being honest about what we're dealing with. But the other job of the union is to put the ideas forward that can actually change that future. So what is the central issue is that we defend the universal service. One, because it's a public service. Two, because it's been there for years and it's valued socially. And I actually think it is still a major contributor to the UK economy, and it still can be. But the company see that completely differently. The companies see the infrastructure of Royal Mail as a burden. They see parcels growing, they see letters declining, and they can't wait to get into the parcel growth areas, and they ain't bothered, and they want to ditch the letter side. The only reason it ain't been ditched is because of the CWU and the fact that we connect with wider public and political campaigns and some of our political work over the years. Yes, the company's been privatised, but it was our union that made sure, even at that point, when we weren't able to stop that, because all the political parties were saying something about Royal Mail being a basket case and being needed to be privatised, we got it in legislation that the USO is there. So, you know, we need to have a good discussion with our members about the future of the USO. The agreement commits Royal Mail to a future USO, but I think we've got to also be open to a discussion that says if we're going to sustain the USO, if we're going to build growth in the future, the infrastructure is exactly right to do that, but it may not be in its current format. And I think there's an economic argument that's coming towards us, hurtling towards us. And I totally get the point that our members go, yeah, but I'm still delivering a load of letters, you know, because they make absorption when traffic goes down and when people leave, and that creates its own pressure on our members that I must admit must be unbearable at times, because postal workers, you know, like to come in, they like to know what they've got to do, they like to get out there, finish their delivery, and they do a great job. And what they're seeing at the moment is management by chaos. Well, you know, we've got to change that. So look, the USO debate is unavoidable.
Yeah, I'm keen.
And we've got to be into the USO debate, and we've got to have that debate with our members. We've got to come up with our ideas about how it's sustained in the future.
And well, on that, Dave, the USO, I mean, we can't let Royal Mail just have this debate on their own with Ofcom. We've obviously seen the announcement from Ofcom. They're going to be looking at it. You can see where they're going to be coming from. I think there is an interesting backdrop to it where you seem to be getting a feeling from, like, reading between the lines and speaking to journalists, that this isn't like plain sailing for Royal Mail and Ofcom to get the change they want. You've got, you know, a government coming to the end of its term. You know, we saw with the Select Committee earlier in the year how much of a hot potato it was politically. Potentially an incoming Labour government, which, dare I say it, touch wood, might be a bit more favourable to working people than this current government.
You would hope so.
Yeah, you would, wouldn't you? But I think, so the stars aren't aligning perfectly for Royal Mail on that and the change they want. So maybe there is a pressure point there for the union. But even without that, surely, you know, we as a union now have to take this debate head on. Like, whether, you know, however we see the shape of the USO, the same, different from Royal Mail, you know, different from now, same as now, whatever. Surely, Dave, we're going to get out there, we're going to speak to members about it, we're going to speak to reps about it. We can't let Royal Mail come in and go, bang, that's how it is, here's the consequences of it once again.
So look, we can influence this debate in a big way, for all the reasons you said. And we've used successful campaigns in the past. But to be successful, you can't just argue the same arguments that you might have argued 5-10 years ago, because circumstances are changing. And what our commitment is we're going to come out and talk to our members about this. We'll do these type of sessions, we'll do it with our reps, we'll have proper sessions where we lay out on the table why these debates are taking shape, why Ofcom are saying what they're saying, why the company is saying what they're saying, which we've covered a bit. But we'll also put our ideas forward, because that's the only way. We can't see what our job as some romantic notion of what it was in the past. You know, defending the past in a way where you don't acknowledge that the world of communications is changing is crazy stuff. What we've got to do is take the best bits of that, which is our members meeting customers on a daily basis in an infrastructure that is unrivaled in the UK. You know, there's no one during the pandemic who met people more than our members in every part of the UK. Now, if business leaders in Royal Mail can't see that that is an advantage to grow a business on that infrastructure, well, they must be mad. And they don't deserve to be leading a company like Royal Mail. And what we got to do is put those ideas forward, popularise those ideas with the public, and I think the public will get behind us. What are Ofcom going to do? Well, Ofcom is a body that I think needs looking at itself. And I think Labour know that, and you know, we've been talking to Labour as other trade unions have. It's not just a problem with Ofcom as a regulator. Regulators have become
who regulates the regulator?
Yeah, you know, it's that debate, and we got to take that up full on. Ofcom are not going to do anything in our favour. They talk about efficiency in a way that puts Royal Mail under pressure, and they talk about it, and you know, everyone understands that. They sort of say to Royal Mail, well, you've got a monopoly of delivery, but you're inefficient. And how do they measure efficiency, let's have that debate out in the open, because I'm telling you now, they measure efficiency ultimately by comparing our members' labour costs with the labour costs of a world of work that is in a terrible state. And for them as a body not to be honest about that and hide it with all other figures that they do, it's not acceptable. So we'll be taking them on in the campaign that's coming. But you know, we'll be talking to the government, we'll be talking to politicians. Labour, we've actually had some good conversations with Labour. So, you know, I think let's see how that develops. That's why you have a connection politically, because you do need, and they do understand, I think, some of these issues. And I might have said that earlier on, that I hope they get elected, but actually we've had some very good conversations with Labour recently about the future of Royal Mail. So let's keep that going. Let's come out to our members. Let's get the members engaged, because I think the members have got the answers. You know, if they want to see the membership as an asset, new management come in and they start to look at the ideas we can put forward to grow the business, then the USO is safe.
Thank you, Dave. I want a couple of quick fire ones, just for you to give sort of a roundup of where we are for our members. The first is supernumeraries in mail centres. So an update went out on Friday from David Robertson, our national officer, but you know, just to give a bit of context, obviously it's not right across the UK, but a particular problem in some big mail centres in certain areas of people who, let's not put too fine a point on it, supported the union, refused to engage with Royal Mail's executive action, and now found themselves with the prospect of being hoiked off to another office or put on delivery or having their world turned upside down. So they're going to be sort of like, we can't go for a session like this without saying, like, you know, where is the union at for those people?
Well, we're in discussions with a company. The agreement says no compulsory redundancies, so nobody should be forced into that position. And we won't accept that position that those people are designated as surplus because they didn't sign into a duty. That's not the company's position at the moment. Again, if you look at these things on both sides, that's how you find an answer. So there are a few issues here that we've got to acknowledge. At some point, with the level of mechanisation, with the level of work that mail centres see declining, with some of that work going into the parcel hubs and whatnot, there is going to be some surpluses. What we've got to do, the commitment we've got, is that people will have a job, and we've got to find the right job for them. We've got this problem where a number of people didn't sign in to duties when Royal Mail were imposing revisions. Some members did. I actually think you've got to look at that from a point of view of, you know, some of the members who did choose to sign into duties are probably sitting there going, well, I don't want to be made put into a redeployment pool. So that creates a problem. Royal Mail was saying they can't shift those people out of that. We're saying that at the end of the day, you know, we've got to look after everybody. And we believe that there are ways through this problem. At some stage in the near future, most mail centres are going to go into a natural repick. We've got hordes of agency workers, and that's an issue that the union's got to address as well. You know, Royal Mail can't say there's a surplus of employees anywhere in this business if they're employing agency workers.
Yeah.
And you know, we need to tackle that head on. So we're fully supportive of our members. We do know all of our team are looking at that. There's talks going on about that yesterday. There'll be talks going on early over the weekend even. There's exchanges going on about it. And we're looking for an agreement that protects all our members in the mail centres, and we're not abandoning the members who have been put through some of those processes at the moment. And you know, we can find a solution to it, and we're putting ideas forward that will help. But what we say to our members who are going through that at the moment, some of them who have been designated as a surplus, is at the end of that, Royal Mail cannot force you to do something that you don't want. Royal Mail themselves have come out and said we can't force people off a shift. What they're saying is we want to go and give it a go. So we're saying, well, what if people don't want to do it then? Or what if they do it but then don't want? And the company is saying, well, you know, we'll have to deal with it at that point. We're not going to force people. So, look, we'll come up with a solution to that. We're working hard on it. We're backing our members where Royal Mail are saying to them that they haven't got a duty. And I hope you understand from this that the commitment is to resolve that issues to all of our members' satisfaction. But I will say this, at some point there is going to be a surplus, and our job is to find everybody work to make sure that nobody gets made compulsory redundant, and we're confident we're going to be able to do that.
Thank you, Dave. Just a couple more Royal Mail, and then I want to move on to the wider union and then the wider trade union movement. The Lord Falconer review. It's probably now for some of our reps a year. Now in the mix of suspensions, dismissals, etc. Hundreds of people. I mean, if you think about, some of the struggles we're having in the workplaces, there must be a couple hundred workplaces who are still missing their rep.
Yeah.
And I look at this possibly as like the biggest test, or one of the biggest tests of the genuineness of Royal Mail management, because in that couple hundred cases, there's going to be some cases where there's going to be some difficulties about people's conduct, but there are literally dozens upon dozens of people who have been suspended or disciplined, and they've done literally nothing or next to nothing, like petty sort of issues that at another time wouldn't have even been a conduct code issue. Yet Royal Mail is still dragging their feet, the review is still taking a significant time. When can our members expect their colleagues back at work? When can those people who have had this huge cloud over their whole life expect a bit of light of sunshine?
So let me give you an insight and an update, if you like, on where we are with the Falconer review. One thing I will say to you is that the level of work that's coming out of it, in terms of pushing forward each case, presenting the information, gaining the information, and getting each of the submissions in the right shape, both individually and collectively. Because what we've been saying is the first stage of this, when we get into the meat of it, and we're at that point now, so members will start to hear about some of these cases fairly soon, hopefully, and I'll explain sort of some timescales around that. But we've been making collective submissions as well, as Royal Mail have. Lord Falconer and his team are approaching this in a way that you would expect. And what that does, and I don't think we can say anything other than, we've only learnt that as we've gone through the process, you start to see how big the process becomes. And, we've produced a very substantial submission. So what we want, we're about to have the submission that joins every case, so that we'll be putting forward the arguments. We've done this in writing, they've got our submission, Royal Mail have put their submission in. We'll be holding a meeting where we'll be talking about those submissions, about the generic situation that caused all of these problems. So, we're opening Lord Falconer to the reality that Royal Mail set up this gold, silver and bronze command structure. Royal Mail are saying, yeah, but we never influenced anything. We don't believe that. We got evidence that shows that. And Lord Falconer will look at all of that ultimately, and he'll come to his view on that. Why it's important we go through a very structured and detailed approach, all I can say to you is it is only being done in the interest of getting our members back to work. It's taking too long. It's because there's so much work to get it in the right shape. Our team is working on it, all the time, every single day. And credit to a lot of the people in our team who are liaising on it. We're about to hold a meeting fairly soon with the members. I think next week the members will be invited to a meeting who are directly affected by it, and we'll be giving them our overview of it. We're also at a point where Lord Falconer will very soon be looking at about 26 cases individually and going through those cases, and we'll be in contact with the people who are directly involved in those cases. The other initiative that we've spoken to Royal Mail about, which I can advise you, is that both parties are concerned about the length of time this is taking, as Lord Falconer is, but he's got to do it in the way that sets out a sort of almost a really clear process that leaves no stone unturned as such, to come to the right decisions. But Royal Mail and CWU have recently written to Lord Falconer saying that we're ready to consider and explore, really, with his assistance, an alternative approach that will build on what we've done but maybe with some of the cases, start to look at them a little bit more from what we might say an industrial relations point of view. And I think that will highlight how bad some of these cases are. And, you know, I'd like to think now that Royal Mail will start to say, you know, we've got to get some of these people back to work. Some of the people who have been out longest, and, you know, they're all in the same boat. I mean, it must be incredible, the pressure. Some of them would have moved on in their lives. And we don't underestimate any of that. But we will be communicating. We are still 100% committed to putting right the injustice that's taken place.
Thank you, Dave. The new Royal Mail CEO, Martin Seidenberg, have you met him? Are you going to meet him? Your views? And obviously the need for, and assuming the imminent appointment of a Royal Mail UK for business CEO, how important is it that you know the board take a decision to bring someone in, I suppose, diametrically opposed to the previous CEO's mantras?
I've not met Martin. The union hasn't met Martin yet. A meeting will take place, we hope, next week after the TUC week to be finalised, but both parties have agreed that we should meet. We've certainly, in terms of communications, made clear what our key concerns are: resourcing crisis, quality of service crisis, morale crisis, how we put it right. We've started to talk about some of the ideas that we've got to put that right. I think the future of the company rests on whether the new CEO and obviously subsequent appointments are going to have to be made, and I think they will take place over a period of time, whether or not that they are bringing in people who believe in the workforce, or whether they're bringing in people who just carry on doing what they've been doing. If they do the latter, then the company's finished. And I think from what we see and hear, I do think there are one or two people in Royal Mail who know that to keep doing the same things that's created this situation is the definition of madness. And it's time for a completely fresh approach. Now, we hope that Martin, the new CEO, is going to do that. It's his choice, ultimately. What I think you're going to see in terms of the appointment of a Royal Mail CEO, which we keep saying the sooner the better if they're going to appoint one, I would suggest to you that the amount of time that's taking suggests that either the field ain't that great, both like internally and externally, and maybe they're looking around and ain't seeing the right people. But they've said all the right things. You know, I mean, he made his introduction on the basis that he committed himself to working with the union. We don't see that in that statement. We see that in the actions that will follow in the coming weeks, and that's the conversation that we'll be having.
Thanks, Dave. So last one on the Royal Mail would be back to where we started, really. I think a lot of members will listen to this sort of half-hour chat we've had and think, well, I've got a lot of information there, got my head in a better place in terms of, you know, the backdrop to some of the discussions you've been having, the difficulties, the climate we're operating in, and the climate, you know, our members are operating in. But I suppose they're going to want follow-ups to this interview.
Yeah.
So I suppose the questions, you know, are we now back to, do we need to be back to more regular communications, more live broadcasts? Do we want our reps to start getting back out there and briefing people? How do we get the union going again in terms of its communications infrastructure, plus a commitment from you really to, you've updated on supernumeraries, you've updated on the USO, you've updated on Lord Falconer and many other subjects here. Are we going to keep doing those things?
Yeah, we're going to keep doing those things, but you know, we also need to make sure that we get the dialogue right and the support right with our representatives in the workplace. So we're going to be focusing on that as well. We've started a new sort of every couple of weeks communication that goes direct to our reps to give them some information, and in turn, you know, they can pass on some of that information to our members. But we don't underestimate, you know, how difficult it is for our members at the moment. And I'm going to kind of focus on this point. If we want to solve these problems, you know, the company, in all honesty, ain't going to solve them for us. So part of our job in the coming weeks in the communications we'll be doing is to saying, you know, what are our ideas to solve growth in the company? What are our ideas to improve the financial position of the company? Because we have got to recognise that if those things don't improve, the background to what our members are seeing in the workplace ain't going to improve either. So I would say to you that the focus of every CWU officer needs to be that we engage with the company, we solve these problems, we constantly put forward what our members are seeing. But it ain't good enough for the union to tell people what we're seeing without also putting the alternative. And the reps who attended the national briefing, you know, we got some great people out there. There's some people out there who have done attendance patterns recently that have accommodated all of the changes that Royal Mail wanted and got our members better attendance patterns. Well, we need to share that. Yeah. We need to share best practice across this union. We need the representatives who can put solutions forward as well as stand up for the members. Now that's not easy, and that I'm not saying that like you can do that automatically, but what we can do by us having those conversations like about the USO, we'd love to sit down with our members and talk about our ideas in more detail on expanding the role of postal workers. Because if we get behind that debate, if we get behind those ideas on how postal workers can have a greater role in supporting communities, and a greater role in rebuilding the economy in the UK, and we are tapping into politicians on that and ideas that we've been working on for some time. You will see that soon. If our members are part of that debate as well, we start to grow the business. So, you know, we are going to carry on communicating, but we've got quite a lot of meetings in the meantime that we've got to find solutions. It's always better when we're communicating not what the problem is, but that we've made some progress. So we've got to balance those two things.
I think that's spot on, Dave. I think people now at the point where it's like, you know, have a union been able to solve this issue? And I think that's what we want to communicate with you on in the coming days, everyone. Dave, the outside of the sort of the all-absorbing world that is the madness of Royal Mail Group, we've won another pay deal, which is currently out for voting for our members in BT. We're fighting on a number of fronts against companies in the telecoms constituencies, redundancies, proposals, etc. We've got the continued growth of our tech workers branch. You know, we've got some excellent education equality events coming up. You know, the union is very busy and is doing a great job. You know, so I don't want to. Obviously, we've got you know head of TUC here because of the size of the issue and the amount of members in Royal Mail can sometimes be domineering at a natural time, but on the back of an unprecedented dispute, it's going to be even more so. But just a word really for like all the work that's going across the union, like in other constituencies.
Well, I mean, like it's the most challenging period for any trade union at the moment that there's ever been. If you look at the issues that we've had to deal with in the last few years, it's just full on all the time, as it is for our members. We understand that, but the union is facing some wider difficult issues. You know, the COVID pandemic, the economic downturn, that affects the trade union. Members leaving companies like BT and Royal Mail because they're at the forefront of technology, and you know, because obviously there's enormous change going on in those companies. That affects the union. So the union's got some financial and structural challenges that we've got to address. But anything we do in order to secure the future of the CWU, there's one thing that we cannot, you know, ever move away from, and that is the connection in representing our members in the workplaces and being as close to our members as we can. So we'll be doing that. The wider trade union movement faces all these challenges. You know, I mean, I did an interview earlier on today for a journalist about, well, there's been loads of disputes across the UK, you know, but the situation is still really difficult. And I said honestly, well, this trade union congress has to reflect on why that is. And you know, you never get everything you want in disputes. Our dispute was the most brutal, I think, of all, along with the railways, but our members faced it every day of the week. You know, the Royal Mail, the BT dispute, really tough dispute. But we've got to see trade unionism in its wider context. And if you don't do that, that's when you don't succeed. And for whatever reason, sometimes trade unions per se talk solidarity, preach solidarity, but when it comes to organising workers, when it comes to building on new workers becoming part of unions. Because if you don't do that, then the race to the bottom becomes tougher because the workers who are unorganised get attacked, and then the companies that are organised, they think the solution is to move to those. It's a very simple debate. You've got to move everybody forward in our sectors that we represent members, telecoms, financial services, and of course in post logistics. There's only one way you do that. You bring unions together, and the motions that we're putting to the TUC are about building that in sensible ways, which is common bargaining agendas. Trade unions now, we want Labour to introduce new laws, the New Deal that Labour have said they're going to introduce. We've got to make sure and hold them to that. Our union led that debate. That's a change in the balance of forces, better employment rights for workers, fair pay agreements across sectors of the economy. All of that stuff can be good. But I believe that trade unions have the power to do that now. And we've got to organise common bargaining agendas across sectors of the economy in all the areas that trade unions work in. So, we're going to continue doing that. It's a big world, and as much as we're focused on, our individual members and the various groups of members and all the structures in the union deal with that, you have to bring all of that together. If you don't, you get isolated. And I think there's a lesson there for all trade unions as a result of what we've seen over the last 18 months.
Thanks. I was thinking before we sat down that because it was quite recently the 8 years since you took office, I think, officially, and in that 8 years I did a little note which we've had 3 general elections, 5 Royal Mail Group strike ballots, a Brexit referendum, a global pandemic, the first ballot in BT Group for 4 decades, 3 post office strikes. I mean, it's a period like no other in the union's history. And when you look at those external things like the elections and Brexit and pandemic, etc., a period like probably in post-war time, an unprecedented period in society as well. So I think that is the context we operate within. I want to ask you about the restructuring of the union as we start to close up. Obviously, from the point of view of the branches will be fully involved in that, the reps will be fully involved in it. But I want to put to you the same thing we put to you earlier on about the USO, if you like, seeking members' input into it. Do you see, as we look at how the union evolves, how it restructures itself to best service our members, there's a role for coming at the members and saying, what type of union do you want to see?
I think that's crucial, and every so many years, and you've got to say that following the impact of what you've just described, it's inevitable that we're going to have to look at restructuring because so much is coming at us, coming at our members. The world is so fast-paced now, and the structures that you've had in place over many, many years, if you don't look at them, then they're outdated. One of the things that we've said we were going to do, and I think our members would acknowledge that we have done, is we said we would engage more with our members. We would innovate that engagement. Yourself and our comms team and others in the union have put a lot of work in to create that world. What that world does, it opens yourselves up to the members' criticisms. That's fair. There's no problem with that. But what we would be good to do, I think, is start to talk about that beyond the usual debates.
Yeah.
So you'll always get members who will say this is rubbish. That trade unions, aren't a place where people come to you saying I'm so happy. That's what a trade union does. It deals with lots of problems. But the world that we've created has made that link, and therefore we've got to use that link in constructive discussions about what type of union do you want. Do our members want to support? And I think that's a worthy part of the restructuring that we'll be doing. And it'd be a good exercise for us to do that. And hopefully it also starts to make people who do see the benefit of trade unions not just want to be inputting in that way, but starting to think about, well, actually I can become a rep. What help does a trade union give me to become a rep? What help at local level can we give to make those reps better placed to deal with the problems they got. I'll finish on this point, Chris. I always believe that like local people who deal with the employer, deal with our members on a day-to-day basis, and then deal with the union, you know, the hardest job of all is there. And it would be great to ensure that whatever we do in restructuring the union, which we will have to look at, well, it's not would be great, it will happen, that will still be there, and that will be built upon in a way that we can give them additional support. So let's get the members engaged in all of those discussions going forward.
There'll be some people, Dave, who are watching this. There'll be some people who will
I thought we was going to end there, but go on.
No, there'll be some people who are watching this, and they'll see it's 50 something minutes up there, and I'll post this for the union, and within 1 minute someone will go, what a load of shite, or, you know, what a load of rubbish, or, you know, like the union's this, union's that, without even actually having sat and watched the session. There'll be some people who will wait to the end and they'll do that. There'll be thousands that obviously that don't do that. But what would you say? I mean, whilst agreeing, you know, our union social media pages are the most lively of any trade union in the country, and we've built them on the basis of transparency, where every member feels that they're part of this union and that every member is valued, and it's the collective. It's not about you. Or it's actually about every single member comes together to build the collective of our union. But, you know, there are, you know, and it isn't, again, it's, you know, same as the other stuff I was talking about, it's a societal thing, it isn't a CW thing where people go on social media, they say what they, and then you see them in person and they're lovely, they're the kindest people you could ever manage to meet, you know. But what would you say to people who are maybe wanting to hit that, like, anger button or type something out about actually if they potentially volunteered to be a rep, supported their local rep, joined a workplace committee, and used that sort of anger to challenge Royal Mail, BT, etc. Maybe that might be a bit more effective use of time.
Yeah, what I'd say to those people, and I would say that more broader about society as well, is that, you know, I was always brought up that if you're going to criticise something, put your alternative. And I think that's something that when people explore that more, they begin to understand how difficult some of the issues are. But more importantly, I think they grow as people. If you sort of test yourself on, so what would I do? And of course, it can't be as simple as like, well, we just carry on striking forever, or we won't go on strike ever. Yeah, that ain't the answers. You have to deal with the situations that you're in. But I think when you engage people, what I always find is, and we've met many people who sort of get angry on that. I mean, look, I ain't got a problem with that. That's up to individuals. They'll do whatever they want to do. Social media has created that well. But there's no doubt about it, if you look across all situations, it's shown some advantages of engagement where people can quickly come together and discuss a thing in large numbers, which is a great thing. But it's also polarised. And the easiest thing to do is to go one way or the other, like press the button. And you see that, you just said it, across all forms of social media. That ain't a good thing in society. And I think where it showed mostly was that when it come to it, in a big turnout, our members voted overwhelmingly for the deal. Well, you wouldn't have believed that if you saw just our social media pages. So I think you've got to use social media. You can't beat face-to-face. And I've got to say, when I've met people who might be the angriest on here, face-to-face, and you can have a decent conversation with them, they're decent people. They just see things sometimes through a different lens, or, you know, they're angry. But I don't think there's any point in keep getting angry. Like, you know, what the real question is what's the solutions? What's your alternative? You know, that's the better debate to be had, and that's the debate we're going to be coming out with. And I think through that you'll engage more of our members, because I would imagine a lot of people also, and we've noticed that, you know, when we see the same sort of group, and there'd be political influences in that. I think our members work that out as well, that there'd be like political groups that will kind of infiltrate those sessions because they have their own agendas. And sadly, you know, my advice to our members is most of those political groups do that to use you as cannon fodder for their own agendas. But most people, I think, would feel more inclined to have a constructive discussion about how do you solve these problems than just keep saying, well, there's a problem here, there's a problem there, and I'm moaning about this, you know. And I think that's the challenge to our union, to all trade unions, to society. How do you solve the problems? What's your ideas? And that's what we've got to start putting across now. The future communications that we do must always end with, you know, yes, there's a problem, but here's our ideas for solving it. Get behind it, and we'll solve it.
Right, thank you, Dave. I want to thank you for your time. A good note to end on as well. What we're going to do about it. That's a good theme from the session. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to all the members who've hung on in there for the whole session, and it'll be broken down in the coming days. Take it easy, everyone, and we'll speak to you soon.